It was the best of times. They were the best of friends. They made the best of memories.
Why don't you go somewhere?
Your place of mine.
Those cool days. Cooley High.
We're not talking about actors. We mean a real monster.
I brought her back. She'll live and I'll get her another body.
I know they're gonna catch me, but don't let anyone see me like that. Please, doctor, help me!
Biologically speaking, it's of primary importance that man should want to mate. Hey, that
You don't get all your kicks from surfing, do you?
We want to be free to ride our machines without being hassled by the man. And we want to get loaded.
You think you're gonna make a slave of the world? I'll see you in hell first!
The American International Podcast.
Are you ready?
Thanks for joining us on this 100th episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And can you believe we've done 100 episodes?
I can. It has been a lot of fun, don't you think?
For the most part, yeah.
We've said on other podcasts why we started it, so there's really no need to go into that again. But I would like to say how very much I enjoy doing this, even though I joked about it earlier. It's a lot of fun to take a very close look at a movie and find out the history of the movie, to watch it, to really get inside the movie and get to know it. And I've had a lot of fun doing that.
Right. A lot of these movies we've only watched for the first time doing this. And some of them, before we compiled our list, we haven't even heard of them before.
Oh, that's true. I'm ashamed to say that I hadn't heard of this week's movie before we took it on for the podcast.
That doesn't go for all of us.
No, that goes for me. I'm speaking for myself, Jeff. I think in a lot of ways that's good, being exposed to movies that I never would have seen otherwise, that were a lot of fun and very important movies that I enjoyed watching. But on the flip side, there are a lot of movies that I would have preferred never seeing.
Such as?
One Summer Love. I was thinking about it. What's the worst movie we've done for this podcast? And that's what I landed on. The one with Susan Sarandon and Beau Bridges. And he's a mental patient with family demons, and she incessantly chases him down as he tries to confront them. It's just horrible.
Yeah, that one was pretty bad. I can remember giving P ratings to a couple of films that I think deserved them, but were very disappointing that they deserved them. The two being Sergeant Deadhead, which should have been at least an okay comedy. And as I always say, House of $1,000 with Vincent Price, because that movie just irritates me to no end.
Oh, of course it does. And I agree, they're P movies. And there's various reasons I give movies a bad grade. And one of them is it's incredibly disappointing. It's not what I expected. Sometimes it's because it's so morally objectionable or just disgusting, and I didn't enjoy it. A lot of times it's because of how ineptly they're made. One Summer Love just sort of hits all of those categories for me. It is morally awful. There's a rape scene that's not addressed as such. It's terribly done. The characters are unpleasant, and it's just gross. It's just all over disgusting, and I hated every minute of it.
I remember a couple more P movies, and that was A Matter of Time, which neither of us particularly enjoyed. But
no, it wasn't that bad, though.
But especially Crime and Passion, which had the sin of being incredibly boring on top of everything else.
It was boring, and the plot went nowhere. It made no sense. Yeah, that would probably be the next up from One Summer Love.
Oh, that's going to be my number one.
I don't blame you. I think it's a strong contender for that.
And what about the best? This one's a little harder because we've seen some pretty good movies.
Well,
not including today's movie.
I can't include today's movie?
No,
because
up to this point.
Okay. I remember really loving Seven, the caper movie, not the head in a box movie. And I know one of our first movies was The Abominable Dr. Phibes, and I absolutely adored that movie. And I still do. It's fantastic in every way. The sequel, not so much, but it's still good. Savage Sisters was so much fun. I really enjoyed that one.
That is a fun one.
And of course, A Bucket of Blood, which I came into this podcast already loving. So that was not going to disappoint me in any way. What about you?
It may not be the best, but going all the way back to episode number 1, Fast and the Furious, is going to be one that I'm going to remember fondly for the rest of my life. Not only because it started this podcast and AIP, but I just think that it was, well, not a great movie. It was definitely a B movie or a C movie. It just fit into the spirit of what all of this is.
Yeah, I was going to say it's such a promising start. You couldn't get off on a better foot than that.
And there are classic films that we've done, like I Was a Teenage Werewolf, that come to mind when you think AIP.
Mm-hmm.
And those may not be among the best. I really enjoy The Wild Angels, despite the gross parts.
It was very gross.
But I just think it's a very good film. And one that really surprised me was one of their imports, Voyage to the End of the Universe.
Oh, yeah, that was good.
I didn't have high expectations for that, and that turned out to be a pretty good movie.
I was going to say Macon County Line, because I had no expectations of that. I thought it was going to be sort of like a deliverance movie, and it was very sad, but it wasn't that. It was actually really good, and I was surprised by that. I loved the 2 musical movies we did, the Tammy Show and the Big TNT Show. Tammy Show more than the other one, but I thought those were a real treat.
And another among the best we've ever done was Gotta Be Coffee.
Oh, right. Anything with Pam Grier, honestly. Friday Foster I thought was really good, too. I wasn't expecting to like it as much as I did. I should give a shout out to Gunslinger, because I think that is also a wonderful movie. I saw a lot of bad reviews for that, but to me, that was just pure perfection. And it's all down to Beverly Garland, who's amazing in everything.
One of the things that I find fascinating doing this podcast is when we're doing the research, we find contemporary reviews that go in the exact opposite of how we feel watching it today. Now, it's a matter of opinion, of course, but you'd think there would still be more of a general consensus. So are some of these films holding up better than others?
I think so. I think that's the case. It also could be just my particular point of view that maybe is not shared by a lot of reviewers back then. What I found out reading some of these old reviews is their perception of what happened in the movie doesn't always track with what I perceive as having happened in the movie. Maybe they weren't watching it very closely. They weren't sitting in their living rooms watching it, taking notes. They were sitting in a theater, then going back to a newsroom and typing up their review. And a lot may have gotten lost in translation there. Whereas we stop down the movie and make sure that we understand everything that's going on. And
yeah, I envy them.
Well, I don't think we'd understand a movie quite as well if we just watched it the one time and then tried to put our feelings into words.
We definitely wouldn't be able to speak as in depth as we do.
No, and plus we have access to a lot of research that they wouldn't have had. These movies have been around for 50 some years, even more. And a lot of people may have written about them. There are interviews from the people who starred in them, who created them, and they wouldn't have had access to any of that. And we do. So we're lucky. And at the end of the episode, we'll mention our website and how you can get in touch with us. But I just wanted to give a quick thank you to someone who did get in touch with us. I'll just say his name is Lowell B. And he wrote us a very nice letter saying that he was digging through the episodes. And I was really touched by his words. It's always good to get feedback, even if it's bad. But his feedback was very good, and I appreciate that. And if you do have other comments, make sure you let us know, either you, Lowell, or anyone else who's listening. We are trying to make this better all the time. So any advice could help. And that website's AIPPod.com if you don't stay all the way to the end. If you want to get in touch with us, there's a link there. And there's a lot more to look at there.
So now we're going to take a quick break, and when we get back, we're going to be talking about Cooley High.
Cooley High was directed by Michael Schultz, written by Eric Monte, and produced by Steve Krantz and Samuel Z. Arkoff.
Cooley High stars Glynn Turman as Leroy Preach Jackson, Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs as Richard Cochise Morris, Garrett Morris as Mr. Mason, Cynthia Davis as Brenda, Sherman Smith as Stone, Norman Gibson as Robert, Corin Rogers as Pooter, Joseph Carter Wilson as Tyrone, Maurice Leon Havis as Willie.
It also stars Maurice Marshall as Damon, Stephen Williams as Jimmy Lee, Christine Jones as Sandra, Jackie Taylor as Johnny May, Juanita McConnell as Martha, Christine Jones as Sandra, Lynn Caridine as Dorothy, Mary Larkins as Preach's mother, Shireen Snow as Tootie, Preach's sister, Alicia Williams as Dee, Preach's other sister, and Lily Shine is Cochise's mother.
So the film Cooley High opens on the Chicago skyscape while the song Baby Love plays. An on-screen title tells us that we are in Chicago in 1964. So in Cooley High, Leroy Preach Jackson and his best friend Richard Cochise Morris are in the final weeks of their senior year at Cooley Vocational High School in the near North Side. We see that they aren't serious students. Preach improvises a way for him, Cochise, and their friend Pooter to get out of class one Friday.
Preach sees a bottle of red paint on the teacher's desk. He's at the back of the row. He encourages the person in the front of the row to pass it back to him. He pours some on a handkerchief, holds it over Pooter's nose, walks up to the front of the classroom, indicates that Pooter has a bloody nose. The teacher just waves him on out, and he escapes. In the meantime, Cochise, also in the back row, sneaks out behind the other row of students, and the three of them escape outside.
I don't know if it's important, but this is during a homeroom class, and the class is reading aloud the code of conduct for Cooley High School. And most of these rules are going to be broken within the context of the film as it progresses.
It doesn't take very long for them to break almost all of them.
So the three of them meet outside with their friend Willie, and then they hop on the back of a bus. Not in the bus, they're literally hanging on the back of a bus, and they take that to the Lincoln Park Zoo.
They spend the day there running around. While one of them distracts a hot dog vendor, the others steal some snacks. They tease the primates. One of them throws poop on Pooter, and then they decide they have to get back. They want to get back before the end of the day.
One of the primates throws poop on Pooter, just to clarify. It wasn't one of the gang.
Yes, a gorilla throws poop on Pooter. Then they decide they have to get back before the end of the day, so they jump on the train, again, skipping the payment part, and head back. Everyone on the train avoids them because Pooter smells of poop.
When they get off the train, there's a brief scene where we see Cochise kind of interrupt a basketball game and shoot a three-pointer so that we know that he's a basketball star.
At the door of the school, Pooter wants them to wait while he takes a shower. Preach says, just meet him at Martha's, the nearby after-school hangout place. So Preach and Cochise go there. We see kids dancing to Sugar Pie, Honey Bunch, and some of the faces that we saw in the school we see here, and of course we'll see them again.
Martha's is just a small diner without a lot of room for dancing, but the kids manage. As our heroes are walking by, a girl from inside comes out. This is Dorothy, and she asks them if they've seen Tyrone, which they haven't. Then Dorothy tells them that since they all missed class today, Mr. Mason has moved up their final exam from Friday to Monday next week, which Preach thinks is hilarious because they all thought they had a week to study, and Preach doesn't care one way or the other.
Dorothy invites Cochise to her quarter party tonight. Cochise thinks maybe this is a belly rub party, but Dorothy says, no, it's going to be a nice party, so you got to pay a quarter to get in. Cochise says he can, he's got to study, but when she asks him to tell Tyrone about the party, he says he will. Then Cochise is looking for Preach, and Dorothy says, I'll give you one guess where he is.
Preach has gone inside Martha's, and he's sitting on the floor in front of the restroom and throwing dice with Stone and Robert. These are kind of the local thugs. Cochise comes in and tells Preach that Martha had said that she was going to kick him out the next time she catches him gambling. So Preach goes to leave with Cochise, but Stone and Robert don't want Preach leaving with all their money. So he asks how much they have. They got 50 cents left, and he says it don't take but 2 seconds to win 50 cents. So he sits down to get the rest of their money.
He throws the dice, and just as the song Stop in the Name of Love starts, the dice hits the shoe of a girl. Preach looks up at the beautiful woman standing in front of him and is instantly smitten. She's not happy to see him, though. He's in the way of the bathroom, and she just wants to pass. She kicks the dice out of the way, telling them that this isn't an alley, this is a restaurant. Cochise tells her to keep stepping, and if they wanted a sermon, they'd go to church.
She says, y'all need to go to church, which inspires Preach. He runs into the washroom and pulls out the toilet paper, trailing it behind him, and sings the Hallelujah chorus, which is kind of odd.
This girl, Brenda, is not impressed by this. She turns around and goes to tell Martha, the cafe owner, what's going on.
So Preach returns to the floor to win that 50 cents, I think.
Yeah, he rolls a 7. He would have won, but Martha comes at him with a meat cleaver and chases them all out, and everyone cheers.
The next scene has Cochise and Preach, and they're making out with a couple of girls in the downstairs hall of an apartment complex.
There's a lot of pressuring going on here. They want more than the girls are apparently willing to give them. Cochise is with Johnny May. Preach is with Sandra. Johnny May says that she'll go further if Sandra will, and Sandra's like, no way. So I don't think Johnny May wanted to either. She was just using that as a convenient excuse. At least I thought so until the scene progressed a little further.
So Cochise takes Preach outside to talk to him and basically tells him that he needs Preach to accelerate his game.
Or to just take Sandra home, because he's killing the action either way.
And inside, the girls are saying that it's time for them both to go home. So when Preach and Cochise go back in, Johnny May tells him that she's ready to go, but he drags her off to speak with her privately.
Speak, haha.
Then Preach tries to get Sandra warmed up again, but she's done.
Yeah, they go home. And then later we go to Cochise's apartment, where his mom, his cousin Jimmy Lee, and various family members are sitting around. Jimmy is a little older, and he and Cochise's mom are lightly bickering about money.
Apparently, she just bailed him out of jail and is giving him a nice home-cooked dinner because he's family.
But he just needs a little more.
Cochise is looking around for something, and he asks his mother if there was any mail for him. And she asks him if there was any mail on the shelf where the mail is kept.
He says no, and she says, well, then it ain't come yet. So he gives up.
And meanwhile, Cochise's little brother Tommy is toddling around the house with an envelope.
Oh no, what's going to happen?
Well, he takes it and drops it into the toilet, which Cochise sees and fishes it out. He opens it, reads it, and smiles.
It's the good news he was waiting for. And now it's time to celebrate.
Yeah, next, Preach, Cochise, Pooter, Willie, and Tyrone are walking instead of running, which they usually do in this movie, to Dorothy's party.
But first, they're going to stop and have a little private celebration.
They're all excited for Cochise because he's officially received his basketball scholarship
to Grambling University.
And they all keep kidding around as they walk. One of them gives a playful push to Preach, who scolds them because he's carrying the wine, and they almost made him drop it. Then Preach says as soon as he gets through school, he's going off to Hollywood to become a writer.
Pooter scoffs. He's not going to be famous and he's not going to be a millionaire. And the fifth friend, Tyrone, who was, I guess, off taking a leak somewhere, returns to mock Preach's poetry. He even copied some down when he was stealing a look at Preach's notebook. And he reads it. And there's a reference to throbbing manhood.
Preach asks Tyrone why he's been digging around in his notebook and starts after Tyrone, but Cochise restrains him. The others are all laughing at him, but Preach puts them down, saying, "You all think it's so funny just because I want to make something of myself instead of being a factory worker or a football player." But this outburst only makes them laugh harder.
They're momentarily put off by the angry words from Cochise, but yeah, they start laughing right away. Preach is still a little put out and he separates himself from the group. Cochise goes to him to try and cheer him up because they're supposed to be celebrating. And Cochise says, "Let's have some wine."
Cochise starts to drink from the bottle, then stops and pours a bit onto the ground. "This is for the brothers who ain't here," he says. Pooter complains that they're pouring out all the wine, and Cochise repeats, "This is for the brothers who ain't here." He explains that there are a lot of brothers who are dead or in jail, and Tyrone says they ain't here, so they don't get none.
But Cochise wants to pay his respects, so he's going to do what he's going to do. And then they all take a slug. But the kid goes first, says Cochise, taking the first drink.
Then the bottle goes around, and they realize it's almost 8 o'clock, and they better get to that party.
So they get to Dorothy's. They start to head up the stairs. At the top of the stairs, Stone and Robert are trying to get in without paying. But Dorothy stands firm. No quarter, no party.
She's standing in front of the door with an oatmeal container with a slot on the top. But Preach had taken their last 50 cents, so they can't get into this party.
So they come down the stairs as Preach and Cochise, etc. are going up.
Tyrone asks who's got the door, and when he hears it's Dorothy, he says they'll be in like a fat rat in a cheese factory, and he runs on ahead because he knows how to take care of Dorothy.
And in the meanwhile, Stone and Robert spark up a joint, and they share it with the others.
So Dorothy seems a little miffed that she hasn't seen or heard from Tyrone.
Yeah, but his mama didn't pay the phone bill, so he didn't have any way to call her.
Well, she tells him he could have done something.
He could have come by, and Tyrone says, "I did. I just came over." But I don't think she's talking about this very moment. She means before.
But she seems to forgive him, and he tries to get her to leave her post and go off with him, but she insists that she has to watch the door, so Tyrone calls Preach over to watch the door, which then allows everybody to enter free of charge.
Well, except for Stone and Robert. They're gone.
So everyone goes into the party and looks around. Preach sees Brenda, the girl from Martha's, talking to another girl, and he can't take his eyes off her. Tyrone rejoins them, and Cochise tells him that was pretty cool how he handled Dorothy.
Pooter sees some cute girls and says that his fun is going to start now. He joins those two girls, says that he's there and ready to jam, but they only have eyes for Cochise, and they flock over to him, leaving Pooter in the dust. However, Cochise isn't interested in them. He kind of brushes them off.
Preach walks over to Brenda and says hi. She asks him if he doesn't have someplace to go. "Your place or mine?" Preach asks. Brenda asks him if he can't take no for an answer and walks off. Then Preach smiles after her. "She loves me," he says to no one in particular.
He just hasn't come up with the right lie to win her yet. She sees a pretty girl sitting on the couch, and he asks Johnny May, who's manning the turntable, if there are any slow records she could play. She pulls one out, and Cheese tells her to go ahead and put it on. Beechwood 4, 5, 7, 8, and 9 comes to an abrupt halt, record scratch, and everyone complains, especially Pooter, and Cochise tells him to shut up, turn out the lights.
Pooter reaches for the switch, but Dorothy appears out of nowhere and smacks his hand. Her mama told her the lights needed to stay on, so it's Tyrone to the rescue again. "What's the matter, baby?" he asks, gently pushing Dorothy against the wall.
It's some distraction action.
Johnny May puts on the record "Ooh, Baby, Baby" by the Miracles. Cochise thanks her and gives her a kiss on the cheek, and she's very disappointed as he makes his way to the girl sitting on the sofa.
He sits next to her and introduces himself and asks for her deets. She tells Cochise that she's Loretta Brown, as Johnny May takes in the scene. She's jealous. When we cut back to Cochise, we see that his game is going well. Loretta asks him to call her on Friday.
So as they're dancing, Pooter, not having anything else to do, leans on a piece of furniture, only to have Dorothy yell at him, "Would you get the hell off the brake front? My mother said not to lean on the brake front because she hasn't paid for it yet."
So then Pooter has to go eat chips with the girl whose only role in this party is to eat chips. Preach heads into one of the bedrooms, maybe the only bedroom. Brenda's there, and she's not happy to see him. But instead of leaving like she asked him to do, he sits on the bed with her to look at the title of the book she's reading.
It's a book of poetry by Elizabeth Barrett Browning, and Preach is impressed.
He loves poetry, and he gives her a quote from Songs of the Portuguese. "How do I love thee? Let me count the ways."
Then Preach says if she likes love poems, she should really check out Walter Benton. Then he begins reciting a poem called "Were I Pygmalion or God?" "I would make you exactly as you are in every dimension, from your warm hair to your intimate toes. Would you be wholly in your own image? I would change nothing, add or take away."
It's really romantic. Brenda was really surprised to find out that he likes poetry. She smiles at him, and Preach says that he's going to give her a copy of that poem as soon as he steals it.
Back in the other room where the party's going on, Cochise and Loretta are still dancing and have added kissing to the mix.
Another student, Damon, tries to get past Dorothy.
She's arguing with him. He has a reputation for causing trouble and breaking up parties. Damon says he just wants to have a good time like everyone else. He puts his quarter in the oatmeal container and then looks around the room. Dorothy tells him she ain't playing with him. Then he notices Cochise dancing with Loretta across the room, and he storms over to pull Cochise off her.
That's his old lady. Damon tries to throw a punch at Cochise.
Cochise says he'll apologize, but that's as far as it goes. Dorothy stomps toward Damon. She's not going to let him start any fights at her party. Tyrone comes up behind her to try to get Dorothy to cool down. Then Damon punches Tyrone. Tyrone gets back up, and Dorothy tries to hold him back, but Tyrone pushes her aside. Get out of my way. Nobody punches me in the jaw.
After he shoves her, she retaliates by punching him right into the break front. She rushes to keep this multi-story knick-knack cabinet from toppling. She does, and breathes a sigh of relief, but she and the break front are not out of the woods yet.
As the fight continues, Pooter goes into the other room to tell Preach that a fight has broken out, and Cochise is in the middle of it.
Preach had wanted to sneak out the non-existent back way, but that's not an option.
So Preach takes a deep breath, tells Brenda he'll rap with her later, and steps outside,
where he ends up being more of a cheering section than a actual help in this fight.
Cochise and Damon, and they're struggling, bump into the break front, and it crashes to the floor, this time before Dorothy can catch it. She throws her hands to her head and spins around because she knows that life as she knew it is now over.
Then Cochise throws Damon across the room. He crashes into Preach, and both men fall into the door, causing it to fly backwards into the bedroom. They actually knocked it off its hinges.
And Preach gives Brenda a smile.
And a wink. And then we hear Dorothy whining that her mom is going to kill him. I don't know which one her mom is going to kill, but she's got a lot of options.
So now the party is over, and Preach, Cochise, Pooter, and Tyrone are loitering on a staircase outside a building, wondering why Willie never showed up to the party.
Yeah, they're kind of rehashing what went on, and the main consensus is that they would like more of that good stuff that Stone and Robert had.
But that stuff came from Sam, and they won't be able to score anything from him. But they could get some stuff from Jimmy Lee, Cochise's cousin.
Then Willie shows up and wonders why they're not still at the party.
But now that everyone's reunited, they head off, with Willie still wondering why they're not going to the party.
Maybe they're going to get the pot from Jimmy Lee.
Well, they are, but Willie doesn't know that.
And speaking of Jimmy Lee, let's find out what he's up to. He's at a place called Robert's Lounge. He's obviously running a scam. He's got a Mark who is showing pictures of his stable of prostitutes. The Mark picks one, and Jimmy Lee calls her on the phone, or so we think, to tell her that they're on the way. But Jimmy Lee tells the man that he's scamming that first he's got to return this envelope of cash. He holds the customer's money so the prostitutes don't steal it when they complete their transactions.
The Mark seems to think that this is a good idea. He and Jimmy Lee go out to the Mark's car and they drive off together, just as Preach, Cochise, Pooter, Willie, and Tyrone come around the corner. They all make Pooter wait outside because he's too young to go in.
Obviously too young. The rest are also too young, but they don't look it.
Inside, Cochise asks if anyone has seen Jimmy Lee. The bartender said he just made a phone call and left about 30 seconds ago. Cochise makes a face. Was he working? He asks. The bartender says yeah, he had a customer with him. And Cochise nods, and they all head back outside.
Now we're back with Jimmy Lee and his Mark. Mark parks in front of the building, but before they exit the car, Jimmy Lee tells him to put his money in an envelope, just for his own safety. And Jimmy Lee will hold on to it. He assures this Mark that this girl is clean and then lets him into the building, telling him how to find Louise, his intended.
He has to go all the way to the top floor, then all the way to the back, the last door on the left. Then he's to knock and ask for Louise. Jimmy Lee says he'll wait in the car until he's finished. The man gives an okay sign and heads inside.
Jimmy Lee returns to the car, opens the door, and slams it shut just for show. And the man follows the directions to Louise. But when he knocks on the door and it opens, there's no prostitute there. There's a big guy who wonders what the hell he's doing there.
What you want, honky? Is Louise here? He stammers. Ain't nobody here named Louise. Then he slams the door. And only now the man realizes that he's been taken. He rushes downstairs, but Jimmy Lee and his money have left the scene.
Well, as you might expect, what a dummy. So now our five friends are standing on the corner harmonizing on a song. Pooter makes an ill-advised attempt to sing bass, and the guys stop singing so that they can make fun of him. They call him a tenor, and one suggests that he starts smoking if he wants to change that. Poor Pooter.
And then Stone and Robert pull up in a Cadillac. Hey, y'all still walking? Cochise asks where they got the sweet ride, but the answer to that isn't important. Cochise wants a ride, but Tyrone and Willie and Pooter don't want to risk riding around in a stolen car. Come on, Preach. I know you ain't jiving, says Cochise, and he and Preach crawl into the back seat.
As they start to drive off, Chase asks for some more of that herb, and Preach starts bragging about his driving skills to the point where the others finally call him on it. Cochise doesn't believe that Preach ever drove any Maserati, as he called it.
But they pull over, and Preach and Robert get out from the passenger side, and Robert climbs into the back as Stone slides over from the driver's seat to make room for Preach.
Preach tries to get acquainted with the car and ends up blaring the horn and putting it in reverse by mistake. Yeah, he's a really good driver. Then he lurches onto the road as the guys protest. They end up stopped at a light and 2 cops pull up next to them. Preach tries to stay cool, but Stone freaks out and puts his foot over Preach's, causing him to accelerate out of there. He's also holding onto the steering wheel as Preach struggles mightily to control the vehicle. The cops look at each other and decide, yeah, we gotta chase these guys.
The chase doesn't stay on the street very long, though. Preach drives into a warehouse, which is fortunately nearly empty, and the chase continues in there.
They're going back and forth through some narrow passageways. It's actually kind of frightening. What I read was that Glynn Turman is really driving. They're not on a rig being driven by someone in the production staff. This is cinema verite here. And the cops are chasing them the whole time. They get to a part of the warehouse where stuff is actually happening. And there's a forklift sitting at the ready. Preach drives over it, no problem. But for whatever reason, as the cops are driving over it, the lift goes up and the cop car is trapped up there. And the cops too. Up on the forklift, the cops swear that they'll get Preach, who drives off.
So as the Cadillac makes its way back out onto the street, Preach says, I told you I knew how to drive. He starts telling them how he used to drive a Maserati for a rich man, but as he's talking, he slams into the back of a parked car. A man climbs out from the car, yelling, whiplash! The
cops, now on foot, chase after them and shimmy down the beams supporting the bridge to where the car crash happened. So they give chase, but they aren't fast enough to catch the 4 who exited the car.
As Preach, Cochise, Stone, and Robert run off.
They separate into 2 groups, Preach and Cochise, and Stone and Robert separate.
The next day, Preach, Cochise, Tyrone, and Pooter are all hanging out with Willie in his room. They're allegedly studying. Pooter doesn't have to study because he's not in that class, so he's wearing a catcher's mask and flashing a badge. And he places Preach under arrest for being ugly. Pooter thinks that the badge looks real, but Willie says, nah, his brother got it from a box of cornflakes.
Chase is afraid that he'll never remember all these dates, and Tyrone tries to help, but a wrong answer is not better than no answer. Sorry, guys. Preach at least knows when the Emancipation Proclamation happened. And unlike what Tyrone suggested, it wasn't 1776.
Pooter suggests they call it and go to a movie, but there's a knock on the bedroom door. It's Willie's brother, Jeffrey, wearing a cowboy hat. He says he wants his basketball. As the youngster comes in, Preach says they should have gone over to his house to study because nobody there to bother them. But Jeffrey says this is his room too, and he can come in whenever he wants.
While ostensibly getting that basketball, he secretly takes something from his dresser drawer, and he grabs his basketball just as Willie is throwing him out.
They all start complaining about what a pain Willie's little brother is when Jeffrey throws open the door and tosses a few firecrackers into the room.
Lit firecrackers. And the 5 guys take cover as if it was a hand grenade tossed in there. Then they all leave the building and discuss how much money they have for this movie they want to see. Preach has that 50 cents that he won. Cheese has, I guess, enough to go in. That means 3 of them can cover their tickets, but one of them is not going unless they come up with a plan.
Oh, Preach has a plan. Next we see Cochise and Preach are dealing with a couple of sex workers. They ask how much. It's going to be $15. Preach tells Cochise to give them the money. Instead, Cochise pulls out the badge that had featured in an earlier scene and says they're under arrest for prostitution.
They make the women turn around so they can frisk them, a little too eagerly in Preach's case. Then Preach tells Cochise, by his real name, Maurice, to go get the squad car. The streetwalkers beg to not be picked up again, and Preach calmly announces, "We take bribes."
How much, they ask. Preach says $10 at the same time Cochise says $20. He said $10.
Yeah, they go with the lowest bidder.
The money exchanges hands and the other girl gets a better look at that badge. The Lone Ranger, Preach and Cochise make a run for it as the 2 women chase after them shouting, "Rape, rape."
And the next thing we see, we're in the theater watching a Godzilla movie. I've read that it was either Destroy All Monsters or Godzilla vs. Mothra. Cheese wasted no time finding a makeout partner, and so have Tyrone and Preach. Preach with Sandra and Tyrone with Dorothy. And Pooter has no one.
No, Pooter is sitting alone. He gets up to go to the concession stand, but he steps on Dorothy's foot. Tyrone threatens Pooter that if he gets up one more time, he's going to break his face. But Pooter crawls over them anyway and goes out into the lobby. When he returns,
holding 3 boxes of popcorn,
it is suggested he find another seat.
Not next to Cochise.
So Pooter goes to an upper row and begins making his way through. He steps on another patron who stands and tells Pooter he's going to kick Pooter's ass. Someone from the row behind him asks why doesn't he pick on someone his own size. Then the first guy says he can kick his ass too.
"You in what army?" asks the second guy. "This army," he says, shouting, "Disciples!" And a large number of gang members stand up. The second guy yells, "Counts!" and nearly all the other guys stand up. Pooter tries to take personal responsibility for this little gaffe, but it's too late. The fight's on.
As the brawl begins, Pooter, Preach, Cochise, and Tyrone make their way to the front of the theater to escape the melee.
The fight follows them, and patrons in a different theater, I think, marvel at the fighting silhouetted figures come crashing through the screen.
Now we're back at Preach's house. He's not home yet, but his mother is leaving for one of her jobs, and she leaves his sister Tootie in charge of his other younger sister Dee, and Preach comes in just as his mother is leaving. Preach watches her go, then takes off his coat and throws it onto his younger sister.
Right on her head. Then he goes to the kitchen to pester his other sister Tootie. He bops her on the head and defies orders to not eat peanut butter. That's not what Mama said to have for dinner. The phone rings and Tootie rushes to answer it, but Preach beats her to it and beats her away from the phone.
But the phone is for Tootie anyway, so he hands it to her and then goes back to his sandwich.
Tootie gets a call from her friend Cheryl, that lets her know that Bobby's coming over to Cheryl's place. That's great news, says Tootie. So she decides she's going over to Cheryl's. But Preach commands her to take Dee with her, or else he'll tell Mama what she's up to.
Tootie reluctantly grabs Dee's coat and pulls an excited and smiling Dee out the door. As they walk away, Preach can hear Tootie saying, "Who does he think he is, God?" And the words of that Benton poem echo through his head.
And then the song My Girl starts playing, and we see a date between Preach and Brenda. They're just strolling around, and so we see a lot of Chicago scenes here.
Then they go back to his room. They sit on his bed. He tries to kiss her, but his glasses are in the way. He removes them, and his second shot is successful. He leans her back onto the bed.
He throws himself on top of Brenda and presses her back onto the mattress. He tries to get his leg over her, and she's not exactly welcoming this at first. She moves, and something like her hip catches him in the groin. She giggles and asks if he's okay, and in a falsetto he says, "He's fine."
She laughs, and they lean back onto the bed again. He starts unzipping her dress, but she tells him that she can do it. He jumps up to undress, as does she. She climbs back under the bed and says she's never done anything like this before. Preach smiles and draws the shade.
Then we get a love-making montage to flute music. It's slow and sweet. Afterwards, however, Brenda's embarrassed and says that she would feel better if she had something on. She asks for her panties, and Preach does a comic dive under the sheets to the bottom of the bed to find them. And the same with her brassiere.
As Brenda is reapplying her skivvies, Preach realizes that Cochise now owes him $1, and unfortunately for Preach, he said that last part out loud.
Oh man, what a dumbass. Brenda is pissed.
Is that all she was to him, $1 bet? She thought he was different, and he meant the things he was saying.
Preach lamely protests that he did mean them, but she's not listening. She's definitely not going to believe him.
And that's when Tootie and Dee burst into the room.
Luckily, he'd got his drawers on before then.
"Didn't I tell you never to come into my room?" yells Preach. Tootie's eyes widen. "Ooh, I'm going to tell." Brenda pushes past them, and Tootie continues saying, "Ooh." Preach closes the door on them and picks up the stockings Brenda left behind.
As he realizes the full gravity of his unforced error, bangs his head into the door. And now it's time for school. It's Monday.
Cochise, Willie, and Tyrone are walking to class, discussing how ready they are, or aren't, in some cases, for today's history exam.
They're going over their cheating strategy.
Preach sees Brenda at her locker and says he'll catch up with them later.
He first approaches Brenda and acts like nothing happened between them. And for that, Brenda slams the locker door into his forehead. Preach confidently claims that he must have said something during his kinda epileptic blackout. Something she has to forgive him for. It's not his fault.
He has these blackouts and he says it does all kinds of weird stuff that he can't remember. Brenda looks at him, then notices Sandra coming down the hall toward them. "Okay, I forgive you," she says, kissing him, and he responds in kind.
And Sandra sees it all.
Then as Sandra comes closer, Brenda pushes Preach into the locker and says, "That's for yesterday, bastard." And Brenda and Sandra eyeball each other as Sandra goes over to Preach.
What was that about?" she asks. He can't answer it and bangs his head into the locker. Preach's poor head gets a beating in this. Now Dorothy and Johnny May are walking down the hallway, and Pooter's just behind them. He's juggling his books, and he drops one. And Dorothy, in the funniest aside, says, "That's what you get." And then she reports that she can't have friends over for 3 months. I just thought that was a really cute moment. It seemed totally unscripted, and it was just so natural and fun.
Dorothy and Johnny May go into Mr. Mason's class. Pooter tells them he'll catch them later, because he has his own class to go to. Then Damon comes up, wearing sunglasses. Mr. Mason tells him to remove the shades while in his class. Damon does, revealing the black eye he received in Friday's fight. Mr. Mason tells him to put them back on, and that he better at least get a C on this exam.
Damon goes in, and then Cochise and Preach come up. Cheese asks about Mason's daughter. Cheese wants to rap to her. So bring her on up. And Mason says, as soon as I find out where you were last Friday. Preach tries to sneak in behind the two, but Mason snags him with his arm. He wants to talk to Preach.
Mason asks Preach where he was all last week, and Preach coughs and says that he was sick with the flu. Mason says that's a lie because he went over to Preach's house twice last week. After a pause, Preach says that he wasn't home. He was staying in his aunt's house. Then he too goes into the classroom. Preach walks past Brenda's desk, but she has her nose buried in her poetry book so she doesn't have to look at him.
Everyone's talking, and Mason says that class starts now and he has to beat his desk with a ruler to get everyone's attention. He tells the class that if they fail the midterm, they're going to fail the course, and that cheating on the midterm is an automatic fail. Oh, and that reminds him. He looks at Preach and tells him to come sit at his desk for the duration of the test.
Apparently, Preach has a reputation.
And Preach tries to get out of it by saying, oh no, that's your desk, Mr. Mason. But Mason says that Preach is his guest of honor today. Dorothy cackles at this as Cochise and the others panic. What are they going to do? They don't know anything.
So Preach takes the desk up front, and Mr. Mason has Brenda pass out the test, just as two detectives enter the room. They say they have warrants for the arrest of Richard Morris and Leroy Jackson.
Of the two, Mason knows the tall black detective. His name is George. Mason asks what they're under arrest for. George says it's grand theft auto.
So next we see a police officer escorting Preach, Cochise, Stone, and Robert down a hallway and into separate rooms for interrogation. In Cochise's version of the story, they left the party around 1 a.m. Preach, on the other hand, says they left the party around 3 a.m., then took the Jackson Street bus, but the detective interrupts him saying that he had said before they took the L train, so quit lying.
Yeah, those stories need to match, but they didn't have time to sync them up. Later on, we see that Mason has come to intervene on Preach and Cheese's behalf. He's trying to convince George that they're good kids who shouldn't have their futures derailed because of a simple joyride. George is not convinced. He thinks that Cheese and Preach need to learn a lesson, but Mason doesn't believe that lesson's worth ruining their lives for, and they're sharing a joint as they negotiate this.
Especially in the case of Richard Cochise Morris, because he has a future. He just received a basketball scholarship, and he can lose all of that over this incident.
Boys will be boys, right? And Mason says that George himself admitted that they weren't on the scene when the car was actually stolen. And that's enough to convince George. They'll be out in an hour. Then he opens the window to let the smoke out.
Mason thanks him, saying George is still his main man. Then he turns and asks about the other two. George says no way, the record is already too bad to let them off with a warning. Mason suggests that he can change the auto theft charge to a simple joyride or something. Get out of here, says George, spraying air freshener towards Mason.
And Mason says, see you next Wednesday. In some kind of holding room cell, Cheese and Preach compare their stories as Stone and Robert listen. Preach crabs that his story isn't the same as Cheese's, and they didn't leave at 1, they left at 4, and that's not what he said in the other scene. So it's no wonder they never get their story straight. Then they say they never even saw Stone and Robert, who object to being mentioned at all in their version of the story.
Then a detective comes in and says that Cochise and Preach are free to go, but not Stone and Robert. They're going to be booked and have to stand trial. Preach and Cochise sheepishly stand to leave as Robert and Stone glare at them. I guess I don't have to tell you who told on us, says Robert.
Stone nods in agreement. And now Preach is walking home at night. He tries to sneak into his house via the second-story window. He untidily gets into his pajamas. His buttons are all askew. And then he looks on the couch. His mom wasn't at home for this, so the subterfuge was pointless.
He finds a note from Tootie explaining that Mama's working overtime and will be home late. Just then, the door opens and Preach's mother flips on the light. Hi, Mama, says Preach. Don't hi, Mama, me. What you doing riding around in stolen cars? That wasn't me, Mama. They made a mistake. That was somebody who looked like me. And what's this Tootie was saying about you in the bed with naked girls? Aw.
Mama says, you know I work 3 jobs and I gotta trust somebody. She orders Preach to go and get his belt. Then Mama sinks into a kitchen chair saying that she's tired and she can't do this no more. And we find out that this was not in the script. This was the actual actress saying that she was tired of this scene and couldn't do it anymore. But they were recording and it fit perfectly. And after Preach goes to get his belt, the actress playing Mama literally does fall asleep in that chair. Preach returns with the belt and says maybe it's time for him to move out. But when he looks at his Mama, he sees that she's asleep and he leans down and kisses her on the head and goes to bed.
The next day at the school, it's gym class, and Preach and Cochise go in to see some of their friends already playing basketball. These friends, including Willie and Tyrone, don't seem happy to see them. They want to know why they're walking around free while Stone and Robert are still locked up.
Preach and Cochise say they never said anything, but Cheese has no idea why They're the only ones that got out of jail. Robert Townsend says someone should kick their ass, and Damon says Stone and Robert will do that as soon as they get out.
Later, following the history class, Cochise is leaving with his arm around Sandra. Mr. Mason stops Cochise to ask if he knows why Preach wasn't in class today, and Cochise says that he hadn't seen him since gym.
Mason runs upstairs to the boys' restroom, where he finds a craps game already in progress. Preach, however, is just there to use the toilet. Mason comes in and tells all the guys to get out and leave their dice and cards behind. Then he tries to talk man to Preach. He just doesn't get Preach. He reads poetry and history books for fun, but he has the worst grades in 2 states. Doesn't he want to graduate?
Preach says it doesn't much matter, and Mason is disappointed because he's been teaching there for 10 years, pushing kids through school just so they can write high school graduate on a job application. So what is it that Preach wants?
Because with his brains, he could have anything, Mason says.
Preach looks Mason square in the eye and says he wants to live forever.
Mason sighs. He's done. Mason tells Preach, don't come to me for help again. Not for jail or nothing. And Preach lights up. You got us out of jail, he asks. Mason admits this, and Preach says, that's great news. Mason doesn't get it, but Preach says he's got to find Cochise, and he takes off.
Preach finds Jimmy Lee and asks him if he's seen Cochise. Jimmy Lee says, yeah, he's using a room to hook up with some girl, and he can take Preach to him because Cochise's time's just about up anyway. When they get to the room, they knock on the door. Cochise calls out, just a minute. You ain't got all day, Jimmy Lee shouts back. Cochise unlatches the door and goes back into the room. Preach runs in, anxious to tell Cochise what he's learned, but he stops short when he sees the girl Cochise has been with. It's Sandra. Preach falls silent.
He looks horribly betrayed. Cochise looks a little remorseful, and then Preach tries to hit Cochise.
Jimmy Lee asks what's going on. Cochise explains that Preach used to go with this girl. Preach runs out. Cochise is feeling guilty, but Jimmy Lee tells him not to worry about it. It's Preach's problem, not his.
He was surprised that this is all over some bitch. Preach walks through the neighborhood towards Martha's. Once inside, he spots Brenda, and Damon sees him. He goes over to Brenda's table and asks if he can talk to her, and she says okay. And for once, he offers a genuine apology, and she seems to accept it.
Preach starts to explain, but he stops when he hears Damon greet Stone and Robert, who had just entered. Damon asks them when they got out, and Robert says his preacher bailed him out this morning. Preach puts on his hat and pulls up his collar. Brenda asks what's wrong, and he says he just remembered something. Then he asks her to meet him in 15 minutes at the L station.
He shoos her off and then walks in the opposite direction. But Damon sees him and calls him out. He turns to greet Damon and then also says hello to Stone and Robert. Seeing the looks on their faces, he tries to explain that it's not like that. It's not like that. What had happened was that Mr. Mason got them out. They didn't snitch.
They call bullshit. But Preach continues. We can check out what really went down and we can take it from there. But realizing they're not going to check it, he runs into the occupied washroom. A girl sitting on the toilet screams as Preach locks himself in the washroom with her.
This scene goes on for so long. That poor girl. She's trying to get him to get out, but he locks the door to keep Stone and Robert from getting in. Then he tries to climb up on the toilet tank to get out the window behind her. And once again, someone is shrieking rape at him.
From the front counter, Martha hears the commotion and reaches for her meat cleaver.
Oh no.
She tells Stone and Robert that they've got to go. They call out that Preach can't stay in there forever, and they'll be waiting for him when he gets out. Yeah, but not in here, says Martha. Inside the washroom, Preach picks up a plunger. I've got something for you suckers, he shouts. The girl in the toilet is still screaming. Then Preach realizes it's gotten quiet. Good, then you can get out of here, the girl says. But she won't let him open the door. She doesn't want people to see her like this. She tells him to turn around while she makes herself presentable.
He almost complies, but then sneaks a peek before he exits the toilet cell. What a dog. Outside, he asks a stone-faced Martha to let him out the side door and onto the street, which she begrudgingly does. Over at that L station, Brenda is waiting, and she sees her and asks where Preach is. Brenda says Preach was supposed to meet her there. Then she explains that they were at Martha's when Stone and Robert came in, making him act all squirrely. She thanks her and then takes off.
As for Preach, he's trying to outrun Stone, Robert, and Damon, who are all out looking for him. They chase Preach down an alley. He hides in a dumpster and they run past him. It's a very cartoony moment. Then Preach jumps out and runs back the other way. He finally makes it to where Brenda is waiting, and the two of them hop onto the train. She tells him that she saw Cochise and he was looking for him. Preach says later for Cochise. Preach is in love. She goes on to say that Cochise seemed worried after she told him about Stone and Robert coming into Martha's.
Then Preach decides that he has to get off at the next stop. He tells Brenda he'll call her tonight and explain everything. The train then comes to a stop and he jumps off and starts running. But I think it might be too late.
Under some train tracks, Stone, Robert, and Damon find Cochise. He wasn't the one that they were chasing, but he'll do. Robert holds Cochise from behind while Stone repeatedly punches Cochise. Cochise keeps saying, hey man, it wasn't us, but they're in no mood to listen.
After a few more punches to the gut and the head, Stone and Robert let him go, but now Damon wants to go at him and hits him once, and it's hard enough to bounce his head off the steel beam supporting the train tracks. Cochise goes down.
Damon kicks him, telling him to get up. Stone and Robert just stare, then turn their backs and run. Damon kicks Cochise one last time before turning and running himself. Cochise tries to get up and collapses again.
His body convulses one time and then is still. Preach reaches Martha's. Tyrone's outside and Preach asks him about Cheese. Tyrone points him in the direction of the subway. Preach asks if Stone and Robert were there, but Tyrone didn't see them. Preach runs off, promising to explain later. He's going to have a lot of explaining to do.
When Preach runs under the tracks, he finds Cochise lying on the ground. He calls out for help, but the sounds of the train drown out the sounds of his voice.
I thought that was a really great scene. And then we cut to a funeral in the rain. Preach is standing apart from the other mourners, who are gathered under a tent. Preach's mama and family are there, and so are some of the classmates from school.
Brenda's there, but noticeably absent is Preach.
She notices for sure. And It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday plays during this scene.
We see Preach watching this from a distance as the mourners disperse.
And the coffin sinks into the earth.
From the backseat of a car, a weeping Pooter smiles as he sees Preach walking over to the gravesite. Preach pulls on a bottle of wine and pours some out onto the ground. For the dudes who ain't here, he says, then takes a swig.
Preach says sometimes he walks around expecting to see Cheese. He even sometimes thinks that Cheese is going to come to Hollywood with him, and vows that he's going to make it there. He can cheat and steal to get by until then, of course. And that Pooter and the other guys are going to be okay. The other night, they all got high.
Preach says they told him that Cochise wouldn't want them all just sitting around wasting their time, and that he wrote a poem for him. And although he's never read his poetry for anybody, even his mother, he's going to make an exception in this case.
He's going to read it for Cheese whether he likes it or not, because Cheese was not a fan of poetry. He puts his glasses on and starts to read. We were friends a long time ago, laughing, rapping, chasing girls, obeying no laws except the one of caring. Basketball days and high nights. No tomorrow, unable to remember yesterday. We live for today. Preach apologizes that it doesn't rhyme and tells Cheese that he could have been the greatest, and then does a layup with the crumpled up poem into the grave.
He whispers, swish, followed by, I gotta go. Then Preach runs off to the beats of Reach Out, I'll Be There by the Four Tops. Then the film lets us know what happened to the remaining characters before the credits play. As for Preach, he went up to Hollywood and did become a successful screenwriter.
And in a caption that proves slightly prophetic, unfortunately, we learn that Stone and Robert were both killed in 1966 during a gas station holdup.
As for Brenda, she became a librarian, married with 3 children, and is residing in Atlanta, Georgia.
Damon is a sergeant in the U.S. Army, stationed in Europe.
Pooter is a factory worker in Muncie, Indiana.
Shout out to Ball State University, located there. And Tyrone was killed during an outbreak of racial violence at the 1968 Democratic Convention in Chicago. And that's the end.
You're listening to the American International Podcast, where we're discussing Cooley High from 1975.
Cooley High was filmed from October through November 1974 in Chicago, Illinois. Filming had to take place on a tight schedule because winter in Chicago is no joke, and they didn't want to be doing outside scenes then. While a lot of it was filmed around the Cabrini Green housing project in the near north side, some scenes include other areas such as Navy Pier and the Gold Coast.
Screenwriter Eric Monte based the film on his experiences attending the real-life Cooley Vocational High School, which closed in 1979, that served students from the Cabrini Green Public Housing Project on Chicago's north side. While the film was set in and around Cabrini Green, it was primarily filmed at another Chicago area housing project. Monte said in an interview with the LA Times in 2015 that he wanted to show the reality of growing up in the projects. He said, I grew up in the Cabrini Green housing project, and I had one of the best times of my life, the most fun you can have while inhaling and exhaling.
It was director Michael Schultz, along with producer Stephen Krantz, who shaped Monte's numerous stories about his youth into the script for Cooley High. According to Odie Henderson, author of the book Black Caesars and Foxy Cleopatras, Schultz told Krantz to have AIP send a stenographer to take down all of Monte's tales.
In an interview with Chicago Magazine, Schultz said, back when we had finished the first draft of the script, we got a note from one of the AIP executives that was one of the best bits of feedback I'd ever received from a studio guy. It said something to the effect of, this is good, now go write every scene in a way that you've never seen before. That advice came in handy when we were trying to answer the question, without being cliche, how do we find out that Cochise has gotten an athletic scholarship to college? Schultz devised the scene where Cochise finds a scholarship letter in the toilet and casts his own son, Brandon, whose habit of doing just that inspired the scene.
In an NPR interview commemorating the 40th anniversary of Cooley High, Monte said that Cochise's untimely death in the film was inspired by a childhood friend of his, who was killed in a similar manner. Just as Preach headed to Hollywood after the death of Cochise, Monte said that after his friend was murdered, he hitchhiked all the way to the West Coast where he began working for shows such as Good Times and The Jeffersons.
According to a May 3, 1974 Hollywood Reporter news item, screenwriter Eric Monte was set to play the key teacher in the story. However, the role of Mr. Mason was actually played by Garrett Morris, a New York stage actor and singer who later in 1975 became one of the original members of Saturday Night Live. Schultz recalled that AIP objected to Morris's casting at first, hoping to see a Sidney Poitier type instead, but Morris, an actual teacher in the New York City school system, won the part anyway. Schultz joked that he has never seen a Sidney Poitier type in any school he has ever been in.
The $750,000 budget for Cooley High was enough to cover 3 name actors, SAG actors, and after hiring them, Gloria Schultz, the film's casting director, filled the rest of the cast with locals. While some had acting or modeling experience, a good many of the student and family member characters in the movie did not. Sherman Smith told the Chicago Tribune in June of 1975 that he and Norman Gibson were hanging out when a car pulled up to where they were standing. Quote, "A couple of guys asked us if we wanted to be in a movie. We thought they were playing with us, but we took this card and then showed up at the audition. We read from the scripts and we both got parts. And that's who played Stone and Robert."
Cynthia Davis, who played Brenda, was told of the audition by her modeling agent, who thought she'd be perfect for the part. Davis told the Chicago Tribune she earned around $800 per week for her 6 weeks of work on the film. And though she hoped it would lead to future acting jobs, she knew it wouldn't be easy. "I'm trying not to be overconfident about it. I know that show business is very chancy, complicated, and phony." Her role in Cooley High was her only credited acting job, though.
The film was set at Edwin G. Cooley High School, which is shown in exterior shots in the film, but the scenes in the school were filmed at Providence St. Mel High School in East Garfield Park. Cooley High was named after the turn-of-the-century superintendent of public schools in Chicago.
The song, "It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday," by Motown label recording artist G.C. Cameron, makes its debut in this film. The film's soundtrack features a number of Motown hits that director Schultz said he got the rights to use at a low price because at the time, other film producers didn't want to use those classics. "No one valued Motown music but us," he said.
Cooley High had a premiere in Chicago on June 26, 1975 at the State Lake Theater. Director Michael Schultz and writer Eric Monte were invited to attend, and Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs, Glynn Turner, and Garrett Morris were among the cast expected to attend, along with Corin Rogers, Jackie Taylor, Sherman Smith, and Cynthia Davis. The premiere served as a benefit for the Community Film Workshop of Chicago.
The official premiere date for Cooley High was June 25, 1975, when it opened in New York and Detroit.
The tagline in the ad for Cooley High was, "Where the student body was a chick named Veronica, the senior prom was a belly rub, and the class of '64 ran a permanent crap game in the men's room." That quote was used in the ads and other promotional materials for the movie, but by July, ads for Cooley High featured quotes pulled from positive newspaper reviews rather than the unserious tagline.
Box Office Magazine advised theater owners to play up the Black American graffiti angle after George Lucas's film released 2 years earlier. Though it was set in the same era, the movie had only a superficial similarity to that film. Nevertheless, that likeness made a convenient touchstone for almost every film reviewer who tried to describe Cooley High to their white readers, for the most part.
Cooley High was a big success for AIP, pulling in $13 million and becoming the 33rd highest-grossing film of the year domestically.
In the Chicago Tribune, Aaron Gold's column reported that the student actors at the Cooley High premiere he attended laughed a great deal and were touched by what they saw. Many cried bitter yet knowing tears at the movie that so vividly depicted a slice of the Black experience at the high school level.
Gene Siskel in the Chicago Tribune gave the film a 3.5-star review, writing, quote, "Petty theft, a bout with gorilla dung, and the groping of some girls in a hallway leave you with the impression that Cooley High is going to be nothing more than a series of routine and unfunny gags. But then the film's magic begins to work, and Cooley High turns into a beguiling story that's affecting, lasting, and worth seeing more than once," end quote. He praised Glynn Turman, saying Turman as Preach stands out as one of the most likable characters in any movie this year. American International, the releasing company, ought to give him a promotional push at awards time, and I don't think they did.
Ann Gorino in the New York Daily News wrote that Eric Monte of TV's Good Times fame has written Cooley High, an amusing account of high school students of the 1960s. Although said to be autobiographical, the movie recalls the ambience of American graffiti and is practically a parallel, Black style.
Jack Slater in the New York Times wrote in his review that, quote, because it takes a backward glance, the movie is now being called a Black American graffiti, but it has, in my view, far more vitality and variety than graffiti, which profiled bored, despairing youths in small-town America of the early 60s. No one in Cooley High is bored. Like the earlier film, however, Cooley does remind us, almost incidentally, of who we once were, reminds those of us who grew up Black during the 50s and early 60s of the sense of self we managed to achieve during those years.
Also in the New York Times, Lawrence Van Gelder wrote that Cooley High pulsates with the careless exuberance of youth and captivates with characterizations and incidents presented not for the sake of nostalgia, but of the kind of understanding that cherishes and makes peace with the past.
Martin Levine in Newsday wrote, Cooley High has an impressive air of integrity and authenticity. We don't need American International Pictures' assurance that the script was written, quote, almost autobiographically, or that Schultz is, quote, a brilliant young Black director, to feel that the performance accents, their speech rhythms and overlapping jiving, even the matter-of-fact presentation of a decayed neighborhood brings us closer to lower-class Black life than is usual for Hollywood.
Box Office Magazine wrote, this Steve Krantz production is an entertaining mixture of comedy and tragedy. Dreams get shattered and broken by reality, but there's a lot of fun along the way. Since many Black films have been exploitation entries with much violence, Cooley High is a welcome relief. It has a touch of humanity and presents characters with real emotional feelings.
Susan Stark's Detroit Free Press review was titled, Cooley High is more than a Black graffiti, and she wrote that, quote, at first glance, Cooley High looks like nothing more than a low-budget version of American Graffiti addressed to Black moviegoers. It is that, a derivative, minimally financed production from American International, even at film's end. But at film's end, it is something more too, thanks largely to the spirited performances of the two leads, Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs and Glynn Turman. Cooley High asserts itself as a valuable piece of work. Valuable because it appears to be an authentic account of how it was for Black kids in Chicago of the 60s. She concluded her review saying, too bad that this film is being pitched exclusively to a Black audience. White people would enjoy it just as much as Blacks, but in a different way, as instructive entertainment rather than an entertaining look at the past.
Jacqueline Trescott of the Washington Post gave the film a middling grade, saying its nostalgia was deja vu and hackneyed, antiseptic even. She found several comic scenes to be well executed, but these passages still lack a distinctive look and enough fire to raise Cooley above the mediocre mark.
Gil Pollard at the Miami Herald was also lukewarm, writing, a musical trip full of soulful oldies, Cooley High is a mildly enjoyable experience in Black nostalgia. There is, to be sure, not much plot, and what there is quickly becomes a backwash of American Graffiti, even down to its where are they now ending. But never mind, it's fun.
ABC planned a television adaptation of Cooley High, but the pilot was poorly received, and Fred Silverman, the head of the network, asked the pilot's producers to retool the show. It was turned sitcom, with some new characters and with a new title so as not to confuse it with Monte's film Cooley High. After adding new writers and new cast members and a change from 1-camera to 3-camera filming, the movie was turned into the show What's Happening. The pilot was picked up, and What's Happening ran from August of 1976 through April of 1979. The show and the production company were then purchased by Columbia Pictures Television in 1979 and ran in syndication for a number of years after that. Some similarities remain, though. The main character of Raj is very much like Preach, and his mama and little sister Dee, as well as the Pooter stand-in Dwayne, are all close parallels to the film's characters.
Eric Monte sued the producers of What's Happening, claiming that he did not receive proper credit as a creator of the series. A title card at the very end of What's Happening's credits reads, suggested by the American International Picture Cooley High, 1975, written by Eric Monte. Monte claimed that he was promised credit as a producer. In 1977, he filed a lawsuit accusing Good Times developer Norman Lear, among other producers and networks, of stealing his ideas. He reportedly received a $1 million settlement. According to an interview with director Schultz, Monte had a hard time finding work after that. Quote, he was effectively whiteballed, Schultz said. Monte blew much of his settlement on a production of a play he had written. The failure of that began a downward spiral, and at one point, Monte became addicted to crack and ended up homeless.
In 1991, Boyz II Men recorded a cover of It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday for their album Cooley High Harmony, the title of which got its inspiration from Cooley High.
Cooley High is said to have been a profound influence on directors like Spike Lee and John Singleton, whose 1991 film Boys in the Hood is a direct homage.
A year after Cooley High was released, Norman Gibson, who played Robert, was shot and killed in Chicago. Sherman Smith later went to prison for 8 years, but afterwards changed his name to Rick Stone, and after his release started acting again, and still living in the Cabrini Green area, appeared in over 20 stage productions.
Cooley High was listed as number 23 on Entertainment Weekly's 2015 list of the 50 best high school movies. In 2008, it appeared on Time Magazine's list of the 25 most important films about race, and it's number 17 on Spike Lee's Essential Films list.
In July of 2016, Deadline reported that MGM was developing a remake of Cooley High with Devon Franklin, Common, and Tony Krantz. Seth Rosenfeld would write the screenplay. As of this recording, this project has yet to see the light of day.
I don't know that we need it. And the Criterion Collection released Cooley High on Blu-ray in December of 2022.
Well, Cheryl, we're talking about Cooley High, and a lot has been said and written about this film.
Oh, yeah. Doing the research for this took a long time because a lot of people have celebrated it. 2025 marks its 50th anniversary. I expect we'll see more of that. But its 40th anniversary was pretty well chronicled as well.
As we mentioned, Cooley High has been added to the Criterion Collection, which is considered to be a pretty select group of films. And AIP doesn't have a lot of representation in that collection.
I wonder why.
Just a couple of De Palma films besides this one.
Clearly makes sense that this movie would be among the elite few who made it to the Criterion Collection, because this is a fantastic movie.
What about it did you think was fantastic?
There's a lot of things I think are really good about this movie. I do have a couple of problems with it, but they don't overshadow that at all. First of all, the skill with which this movie takes you in is just amazing. You think you're watching this movie of goofy high school kids and their hijinks, and all of a sudden you realize that this whole movie has set you up for this enormous tragedy at the end that you never saw coming. But when you look back, and for us it was watching the second time, you see every step they took to put all this into motion.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. The screenplay is so tight. Everything in here matters later.
As silly as it seems.
And when you look at how this was written, it was basically somebody telling stories and they compiled them and kind of turned into a script. So the fact that it works out like this is just mind-boggling.
I'm getting chills just thinking about how well done this is. Literally, every little thing that at first glance seems just like an incident. Two boys make a bet on a boy betting a girl. A joyride. Getting out of jail because you're friends with the teacher. Every little thing that happens, it all adds up to
everything has a consequence later in the film.
Right. And that's like life. But like life, you don't see it coming until it's happened. I mean, sometimes you can, but for this, no one could have seen this coming. It just happened. And it's tragic and it's moving and it's important.
Well, it all happens so fast, like life does. The movie opens with Cochise going to get his friend out of bed and take him to school, which they immediately skip. And then this group of kids are just running everywhere.
Yeah, it's so fast paced. I heard someone else compare this to the 400 Blows, and although I see it being very different, that part of it does track where it's just kids being kids out on the street having fun. And it is fun to watch. It's fun for us as the audience. But then looking back, you see how this net is tightening around the characters until their inevitable fates play out. And it's so sad. All that happiness that you had building up turns to tragedy. And it just hits you like, well, like a steel beam supporting the L, how monumental this all is. It's amazing that a movie could do this, especially an AIP movie.
Well, when you consider that, even though there are a lot of characters in this movie, a lot of them are inconsequential. For the four friends we were introduced to at the beginning are Cochise, he obviously matters, Preach matters, Pooter, he matters as comic relief, I guess, and Willie, who doesn't really matter much at all.
No, he just kind of bops in and out of the film.
And Tyrone serves that same purpose.
Yeah, I don't know why they needed both of them, but I don't mind. And part of the thing that I really do like about this movie is the cast. Obviously, Glynn Turman does a show-stopping job as Preach. He's just fantastic in this movie. Even though I didn't write it all down, every review I found praised his performance. And why wasn't he submitted for Oscar consideration? Or was he? I don't know, but he should have been. Because he's that good. And Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs is really good too. You know, before this podcast, I only knew him as Freddie Boom Boom Washington on Welcome Back, Kotter. But there's a lot more to him.
Well, in episode 19, we did Youngblood, and he featured in that.
And he was good in that, but I think he was a lot more alive here. Because he was one of the main characters.
Until the end of both films.
Oh, Jeff, jeez. His legacy lived on. We're watching a movie about at least a character like him 50 years later and still talking about it. So he is alive. He's very much alive. And he had so much going for him. That's obviously a key part of the tragedy is that he had such a future to look forward to. And it was his life that was cut short because of this stupid joyride, which, to be fair, was his idea.
Well, of the entire cast, there were only 3 professional actors, at least at this time. There was Glynn Turman, of course, Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs, and Garrett Morris. And everybody else was just cast from being in the Chicago area.
And I think that's part of the charm of this movie. There aren't big name actors, and some of the people aren't even actors. The women who played Preach's and Cochise's mothers and some of the other students, they're just there. They don't have acting experience, but they're so natural and they're so fun to watch. And they're just so realistic. They add such a dimension to this movie that professional actors would not have added.
And even of the others, some of them had at least brief careers. Jackie Taylor, who played Johnny May, opened up a theater company in Chicago and eventually did appear in some movies later on as well, including, interestingly enough, To Sir with Love Part 2 with Sidney Poitier.
Oh, wow.
That was a made-for-TV movie. And there's Stephen Williams, who played Jimmy Lee, who went on to have a pretty successful career.
Oh, yeah. And spoiler alert, he's going to be featured in the next movie we talk about as well.
And he was not credited here, but Robert Townsend is in this movie as well.
He had a very bit part, and we'll see him in the next movie too.
Well, the next movie was shot in Chicago. So a lot of these people came back because they were trying to make a career. We see Joseph Carter Wilson, who played Tyrone. He appears in that film, as does Nathaniel Reed, who played the Detective George here. And Lynn Caridine, who plays Dorothy, appears in it as well.
Speaking of Lynn Caridine as Dorothy, her character is my favorite in this movie.
Oh, same here.
She is so funny trying to protect her apartment from the partygoers, standing soldier-like at the door, not letting anyone pass, and yet still being romanced by Tyrone out of a few quarters, and punching Tyrone after he shoves her. She's amazing in this movie. I don't know what her background was before she got here. I mean, I think she obviously had acting experience, but she is so natural and fun in this movie. I can't imagine looking to Hollywood for a name for this instead of having her here.
And she has a much larger part in The Monkey Hustle, but it's not as memorable a performance.
No, and I think we mentioned that the scene with Preach's mom finding out that Preach had gone to jail and et cetera, that scene was a non-professional actress. She just happened to be there. And this woman really did have 3 jobs and she really was exhausted. And since they were on such a tight shooting schedule, they were shooting like 14-hour days. And so that was her exhausted at the end of the day, talking about how exhausted she was. And in that moment, it's the most natural thing. It's so realistic. We don't get to see her say it because it wasn't for camera, but they used it anyways. But I could totally relate to that. She's so honest and real there. And that honesty and realness permeates the whole film. And I just love it for that.
So much of that can be seen in this film. The conversations between the guys, they're very natural. They're ragging on each other. They're just having fun, just boys being boys. It's very realistic.
I won't call it an objection, but the only thing I think this movie could have added is maybe a little more life to the female characters. But I get that it's not about them. It's about Preach and Cochise, their relationship, and the tragedy that befell Cochise. But their characters are also womanizers. They're just out to get laid in some cases. Although I do believe that Preach really did fall for Brenda. But I mean, it's because she was so pretty. But I think he really did grow to like her. But, you know, they do seem a little casual in their relationships towards women. They rip off the hookers. Preach disappoints his family and teases his sisters. So they're not super aware of the women in their life and how their actions affect them. But again, they're high school boys, and I wouldn't really expect that.
I'd say of the kids, the ones who are girls, the 3 that stand out are going to be Brenda, for obvious reasons. Dorothy, just because she does.
She made herself stand out.
And Loretta Brown.
You think so? She's only in one scene.
She's only in one scene, but seems like a very unusual person.
Yeah, it's hard to describe her affect when she's talking to...
She doesn't close her mouth ever.
She is a big fan of Cochise because he's a basketball star. It seems like all the girls are into him and he takes advantage of that. But she was very into him and she had no problem cheating on Damon with him. However, that actually is a very pivotal thing that she does because had she not done that, Cochise would not have made an enemy of Damon, who was the one who killed him.
And again, that's the script tying everything together. The only things that happen in the script that don't have consequences later are when they're at the zoo. That's just a day at the zoo. They're stealing peanuts and marshmallows.
Teasing the gorilla.
Which I guess has consequences in that Pooter has poop thrown on him when they throw marshmallows to the gorilla.
Oh, right, yeah.
But beyond that, the poop incident doesn't have anything except that they all avoid him on the train.
Well, I guess
and that's all comic stuff. That's not vital to the plot. It's not important enough to even be there. It's just there for us to get to know these characters and enjoy their presence.
I would argue that it does have value to the plot because we learn that they don't take school very seriously. Preach has been skipping this history class all week, and it shows how much they value having fun over school. So in that case, it does have consequences. So I think that does teach us something very valuable about the characters, and the way they are is why they have those consequences. So I would argue it is important and it does need to be there.
But it could have been anything. It could have been just a day at the zoo. They didn't have to have those little bits in there, is what I'm saying.
Oh, well, yeah, but it gives us a chance to know them.
Which is what I said.
It's Preach who distracts the hot dog vendor. And we see how he has a way with words and how quick thinking he is. And the others are the ones in back just stealing stuff. So we learned that Preach is leader of the group. If some scam is going to be pulled, it's going to be Preach doing it. He's the mastermind behind almost everything they do. So we do learn that. And the fact that we can look at these silly incidents and make such a big thing about them is another reason why this script is so incredible. All this nothing happens. When we first watched it, we're like, oh, wow. This is gonna be...
were.
When we first watched this, I was going to be like, wow, this is going to be so easy to talk about. But then
I wasn't so sure.
The second watch, you just see how important every little thing is. The only thing I would say is not important is that one scene with Jimmy Lee and his mark and the fake prostitute. That could have been cut from the film. We don't need to know that Jimmy Lee does that. Like, we knew he was out with the client. That was just a bit of color added to it. It was funny and it was a good scene, but it wasn't about our main characters.
Yeah, it didn't add anything to what we know about Jimmy Lee. We already know he'd been in jail and bailed out. We didn't know why, but now we do. He's a wannabe pimp. Yeah, he's a pimp without a stable.
He doesn't need one, apparently.
No, looks like he does pretty well for himself.
So good for him for not taking advantage of women and yet still making money. I just love everything about this movie. And I'm ashamed that I've never seen it before or even heard about it before this podcast.
I'm even more ashamed because I've had it on my shelf for years and I did put it on once and I turned it off after a few minutes because the sound quality really isn't that great here. It's a low budget film and I just didn't have the patience for it at that time. So I had never seen it all the way through.
And one other thing, speaking of sounds that should be mentioned, is the soundtrack. What a great soundtrack we are blessed with in this movie.
It's a blessing and a curse. It's because of the soundtrack that it gets compared to American Graffiti.
That's true and unfortunate. And it's not like I know a lot about American Graffiti. I think I watched it a long time ago. I think that comparison is odious, as they say, because it really is reductive for this movie.
It really is nothing like American Graffiti. American Graffiti is a bunch of different characters and it's all one night. This centers around main characters and they have interactions with others, but we stick with basically Preach and Cochise throughout the entire film.
And what happens to them actually matters as opposed to just one night of hijinks.
Not even hijinks. It's like the last day of summer or something, or somebody's going off to college. Somebody's deciding whether or not to go. Somebody's going to join the army.
Yeah.
It's just their last night at home.
Because there's so many consequences to this chicanery that goes on. But there are really good songs in that. I didn't know that It's So Hard to Say Goodbye to Yesterday, which I knew as a Boyz II Men song, came from this movie, from a different artist. It's a great song.
I wasn't familiar with the song, but I did know that there was an album called Cooley High Harmony, and I assumed that it was named after the film.
It's so perfectly played in this movie. Although I kind of think it should have been the last song in the movie. I think it would have been great for under the credits and finding out what happened to everybody.
I disagree with you there. I think that playing that over the funeral is just natural. And then having it go upbeat again because Cochise's life is over, but Preach's is just beginning.
But in our epilogue, we learned that 3 other characters died untimely deaths.
And that's sad, but they're not the main characters here.
I think they could have skipped that epilogue, to be honest, especially since one of the actors died in a manner very similar to the way his character died. I don't know, it just hits it a little hard for me that it was so prophetic for just that one person, but still.
And only about a year after the film premiered.
Anytime I see that gimmick in a movie, I kind of like, well, again, I don't think it really matters because I like to go with my own ideas on what happens to the characters. That is, if I care enough and I'm invested enough in them to wonder how their future is going to be.
I think the slide describing what happened to Preach was important, but nobody else needed to be there.
Right. And we know what happens to Preach because you and me, we know that he's the Eric Monte stand-in for this movie.
Right. But if you're just going to see a movie, you might not know that. I think it's important to add that in there that, yeah, this guy made it.
But as for everyone else, I think they're just unnecessary.
I mentioned some of the actors who appeared in The Monkey Hustle as well as also being shot in Chicago, and that Lawrence Hilton-Jacobs would show up in Youngblood. But we will also see Glynn Turman again. He does a voice in Fritz the Cat, so we won't see him there. But he also appears in JD's Revenge,
which we're really looking forward to, but it's not on the schedule yet. And I know him from A Different World.
And I know him from Gremlins.
And he was in The Wire, too, and that's one of my favorite shows. And anyone in that show is an automatic person I will follow forever. So I knew that he was going to be good in this. He's just good. He's a great actor.
So I think I know where this is going, Cheryl, but do you want to justify your rating using our AIP scale of A is awesome, I is intermediate, and P is pathetic?
Well, not only am I going to give this an A, obviously, but I'm going to revise my pick for the best movie we've ever done for this podcast and say it was Cooley High, because this movie is so good, because I still have goosebumps from it. And I just loved everything about it, aside from a minor nitpick here or there. But I don't really think I need to say anymore about why this is an A movie. This is an A movie. It's just not even questionable for me. And I'm going to guess that you would think it's an A movie too.
Well, Cooley High is an example of everything I love about film. I don't know if you know this about me, but I really like movies.
I have kind of picked up on that.
And I really like talking about them.
I've known you.
And this seems so simple in its execution. It's a low budget film. They're using non-actors for the most part, but the performances they get are all so genuine. Maybe it's because they're not actors. Everybody just seems like they belong in this town. And it's because they do. This is a slice of life.
A lot of them were still there after the movie ended.
And they were there when Monkey Hustle came to town. So they were able to do another movie.
You're right. There's nothing artificial or contrived here.
And I'm not going to just say this is one of the best movies we've seen from AIP. This is one of the best movies I've seen, period. I don't even know what else to say. If there is one thing that I would change about this is I would have given the character of Pooter more to do. He's almost really good at being comic relief. We got the bit with the badge, and I would have liked to have seen more of that.
Yeah, he's adorable in this movie. I don't think we mentioned it. He's an actual teenager. He's 15 in this movie. Glynn Turman is 30. So he has half Glynn Turman's age in this movie. But he is such a great character and very much underutilized as to what he could have been. He's not one of the main two, so I can see why they didn't really focus on him. But we know less about him than we know about Dorothy.
And with a name like Pooter, you're just dying to know more.
Why is he named Pooter? I mean, I can guess, but they should tell us.
Because he smells like gorilla poop.
Can see why Preach is called Preach. He's got that way with words.
Apparently, Eric Monte's nickname was Reverend when he was growing up.
Oh, well, yeah. And for the same reason, I'm sure. The way with words. Cochise probably picked just a cool name because he's a cool guy. And Willie and Tyrone go by their real names. So Pooter is the mystery, the enigma here. But it's a silly nickname and he's a silly character. So that makes sense.
So despite not giving Pooter enough to do, I'm going to give Cooley High an A+.
And I'll give it an A++ because I got to one-up you. I think we've said it already. We told you about the movie. We told you the history behind it. We told you the other reactions. We told you our reactions. How could you not conclude that this is a A+ movie? As I mentioned at the top of this podcast, we have a website that you can use to contact us. Tell us how right we are about Cooley High, because I will accept no notions to the contrary. It's AIPPOD.com, AIPPod.com. When you're there, you can look at trailers, lobby cards, posters, etc., and find out a little bit more about American International Pictures. So we hope to see you there, and we hope to hear from you about how right we are. And you can tell us anything else you like to. And again, thanks to Lowell B. for reaching out and also for our review, which we really appreciate.
Class is dismissed for the Cooley High episode of the American International Podcast. I'm Jeff Markin.
And I'm Cheryl Lightfoot.
And we'll meet you at the drive-in. Follow the American International Podcast on Instagram and Letterboxd at AIP_pod and on Facebook at facebook.com/American International Podcast.
The American International Podcast is produced and edited by Jeff Markin.
A man whose mind is distorted by hatred.
And Cheryl Lightfoot.
A girl hungry for too many things.
The American International Podcast is part of the Pop Culture Entertainment Network.